Hello, everyone. I'm Carl Johnson from the University of Connecticut, along with my colleagues Barbara Johnson, Prasanthi, and Lingamallu, and our mentor, Professor Garris Poonj. Today, we're presenting on the catastrophic effects of global warming, the forces at play. So we are studying how greenhouse gases are affecting the warming of our Earth, and then thus linked to catastrophic events around the world. Our objectives is to develop powerful visualizations of key drivers of global warming, to prove natural disasters are linked to rising temperatures, to create greater awareness and ignite discussion of solutions, and to recognize that policies alone won't work. Solutions must be customized, acted upon, and then monitored by country. So we use sophisticated mining tools, including Tableau and IBM SPSS Modeler, and source our data spanning 194 countries around the world, and for some cases over a century. And so we source the data from the World Bank, the World Resources Institute, NASA Earth Data, the MDAT International Disaster Database, and the EPA. So is climate change real? It's kind of a hot debate, nowadays, especially with our president. And as you can see from the shirt I'm wearing, sourced from Amazon, and their shirts as well, you could see both sides of the coin. So for here, and this is the preface for the next chart we're going to be going over, this is of global land and ocean temperature anomalies sourced from NASA. And the reason why temperature anomalies are important is because it creates a base period. So it shows the difference in kind of a longitudinal study of if it's positive, then it's warmer temperatures, and if it's colder in the blue, as you can see kind of in the previous century, it's a negative. So this was a chart that we made in Tableau, and it covers from 1905 to 2015. And as you can see, and this was taken from September every year. So originally this was actually done for every 5 years we did this, but unfortunately it was over millions of cells, so we didn't want our Tableau crashing in the process. So the first one is of 1905. We could see a lot of blue in the chart of the temperature anomalies. And then as we get to 2015, we can clearly see that it's a pretty big difference from a century later. We're getting, and this was seen even through all the years previous, that gradually over time, our temperatures are getting warmer, and especially the temperature anomalies of the extreme temperatures. So we've identified 5, what we're calling it, climate dragons. So they account for 64% of the greenhouse gases being emitted around the world. It includes China, the US, Brazil, Russia, and India. Now I'm going to bring it over to my colleague, Barbara.
Yeah. Okay, who likes the Game of Thrones? Here we go. Okay, I'm the youngest of the students. Actually, I kind of reemerged as a student after 30 years after taking care of a sick child, but so I'm really happy to be here. And I am a little nervous, but I'll do my best. But in any event, we used a couple of very sophisticated programs, the IBM SPSS Modeler, which is my favorite friend right now. We used it to identify the top drivers of global warming. And in that particular tool, you can automatically run like 10, 15, 20 models simultaneously. But really my favorite feature is the ranking of variable importance. So here I have the top ranking variables. These are statistically significant. Obviously, GDP per capita is critically important. Forest area, electricity access, and then energy use, which goes beyond electricity, including transportation, fuel, manufacturing. Now, this is sort of the base of what I'm going to use for the presentation, but we layered on top of that Tableau, and it took me a lot of effort to learn it, and there's just that platform is so powerful for visualization. So that's what we really want to get through today, is that if you want to make data come alive, then use a BI platform such as Tableau. Okay, this first chart talks about GDP per capita and the relationship to global warming. Now, this chart may not be new to everyone. The top one shows CO2 emissions relative to GDP dollars over time. And you can see it is almost perfectly correlated, right? There's no doubt about this. You can actually automate this over time, but I'm going to save a few minutes here and not do that. It gives you a tooltip with vital information and a regression equation. But what I want you to know is that the world does not represent every country. Okay, Elaine is going to be looking at me in a minute, but I can go through 194 and you would see varying trends. And where the trends really do vary is in Europe. And we're going to get back to that because we see a curve inversion. Now, on the bottom chart, this is the foundation, right? This is where we're talking about temperature anomaly versus CO2 emissions over time. Look at this strong relationship. So if anyone says this is fake news, oh, Carl changed his shirt, by the way. If anyone says this is fake news, if you look at this data, this goes back to the early 1900s, there is a strong relationship. And Patrick yesterday talked about validation. Well, if you have a perfect holdout situation, the data that we have access to does not go through the current day. That's a failure of our system to not report current information. But if we look at this last period, it projected, forecasted 38 million kilotons of CO2. I hate to tell you, but that is where we are today. That is amazing. That is a perfect holdout. And now I'm going to go at a little quicker pace. So this chart takes us more into the current day. I'm looking at change in GDP versus change in CO2. This is looking at the last 5-year period. And up in the upper right-hand quadrant, you see the little baby dragons, right? These are the emerging countries. West Africa, Central Africa, East Africa, and then all the little red bubbles in the middle are way above the average in terms of growth as well as emissions. Now, the EU, it's never good to be at the bottom left-hand corner of the quadrant, but in this case, it's actually very good because these are the areas where CO2 emissions are declining, and I'm going to talk about that in just a minute. But let's go to trees. I love the forest, as we all do. Why are trees important? Well, trees are critical because, as we learned in grammar school, right, it takes in carbon dioxide and releases oxygen into the air that we breathe. A tree can capture 48 pounds of carbon dioxide in a year. It can sequester a ton of carbon dioxide over a 40-year period. That's pretty darn good. But what we see happening is that there's fewer trees. So fewer trees means more CO2 and warming temperatures. And it amazes me that there's a debate about whether we should cut down trees or not. Obviously, I would say absolutely not. Let's plant trees. But there are debates raging. This next visualization, which is one of my favorite, it looks at the forest area as a percent of land. I'm going to focus on 2 continents, South America, I promise not to get you dizzy here, and then also Africa. So this is going to be automated, and you're going to see the denser areas are darker green, right? And the lighter ones are where it's drier. But so let's see if you can identify it. So take a look, Brazil, Paraguay, in the Central Africa region, it's getting lighter. I've also developed what is a heat table. And the heat table is arranged by continent, looking at individual countries, and you can also see the transition of going from deep forest to not so deep forest to desert. All right, but why is this important? Okay, so this is critical. It's estimated that 95% of all forest area is being replaced by agricultural land. We know that farms emit the highly potent methane gas. It's over 30 times more potent than CO2 as a heat-trapping gas. So from this visualization, you can see the green, that is the forest area declining over time. That's down 17%. The brown line is up 24%. But what is really alarming, it used to be a red line. I'm not sure how it turned blue, but it's a blue line, and it's up. This is emissions. Methane emissions up 66%. More cattle, I didn't know this actually before I started this, means more belching, right? Or more gases in the atmosphere. And more crops means less forest. All of that leads to global warming. So guys, instead of doing this all at the back end in terms of solutions, we're going to go through this because it just kind of makes sense. But protecting forests and sustainable farming are critical in developing agricultural countries, right? All of those little bubbles, the orange bubbles, and the Asian bubbles that we saw, planting trees, soil carbon sequestration, sustainable farming, plant-based meat products, McDonald's just came out with one, by the way, and better quality livestock diets. Okay, as countries develop, electricity and energy use is also rising. Quickly going through this, we're seeing this is a visualization of the world, but you can look at it for any country in any year. Energy is the dominant source of emissions, and that is in providing electricity, heat, and transportation. But I'm going to focus just a minute or so on the electricity use, or the sources of electricity and heat. So on the left-hand side, you see the sources. Coal is number one, still today. Natural gas, another fossil fuel, and then renewables at the bottom at 6%. So we actually see, if you look at these lines, the coal use has actually increased, not decreased. And off to the right, we see a bubble chart. I love these bubble charts. The bubble chart reflects the amount of renewable energy being used in countries across the world. This is relative. The color represents the continent. The green is Europe. So we saw that carbon emissions were down in Europe. Here, the green represents Europe. It's obviously, you know, they're controlling their emissions. But why is coal the number one factor? Coal is plentiful, right? It's in the earth. There's a lot of it. It's cheap, but it is dirty. And if we look at that same bubble chart, but now we're looking at coal in terms of metric tons, this is absolute levels, we see I mean, these come to life, right? China represents 50% of the coal, followed by the US and India. And, you know, I just looked at the news a couple weeks back, and I saw that carbon emissions hit a record high in 2018, up 1.7% versus the prior year. More coal burning in India and China. High oil consumption in the US, you can see those numbers off to the right. But we, in order to win, in order for this planet to win, we must all champion, particularly those climate dragons, green energy, reducing coal and rapidly increasing renewables. We must become more energy efficient. But time is running out, guys. If you look at all of the news and you think about how many years, it's been 10, 15, 20 years, and nothing's really changed. We need innovation today. Technology for carbon dioxide removal. In Europe, they have Climeworks. I read this, I said, this is insane, where they're actually capturing the CO2 and using it for fuel for transportation, low energy. Satellites to spot methane leaks on TED Talks recently, right? That's not going to be for a few years. And then AI, which is my favorite topic that I've been studying for energy efficiency. And finally, in order to make a difference, in order to improve, we must have measurements. We must have good data. Solutions must be customized, acted upon, and monitored. The EU shows progress. If you look at these charts, the EU in the 1970s set strategies and aggressive targets. Their emissions are down. Coal use is down, renewables are up, and they have more forest. There you go. There's proof there that it can work. Okay, now we're going to switch gears to catastrophic events, because I talked about ways we can fix things, but if we fix nothing, we're going to have more catastrophic events. Thank you.
Thank you. So in the last decade, we've seen so far what happens, the causes of greenhouse effects and global warming, but then if we don't take action, what happens? In the last decade, the world has seen record-breaking catastrophic events in terms of people affected, loss of human life, and economic damages. In 2017 alone, the global disasters affected 93 million people, killed 6,400 people, and cost a staggering $306 billion, a 50% increase over 2016. In this visualization, we show you that the higher the temperature rises, the temperature anomalies, there are more number of natural disasters, hurricanes, floods, drought, extreme temperatures, and wildfires. Now, this is a visualization which is based off of EMDAT disaster data. It spans 1960 to 2018. And what we want to show you here is, if you notice the bubbles, you'll notice that any kind of natural disasters have been coming at a more rapid pace and intensifying as seen by the bubble sizes. Extreme temperatures may also be related to volcanoes and tornadoes. If anybody's been following the news, Oklahoma had 61 tornadoes. I just got the time limit. Okay, so I'll end on this. We had more charts showing each of the 4 elements with the catastrophic events, but essentially what we're trying to show is it's time to act. There's no time to delay, and we have proof. So as data scientists, we all know that if you see something established and verified and validated with data, it is true. So time to take action. The climate is changing. Why aren't we? Thank you.
Question from the floor?
Hi, my name is Marlon Mupiri, and well, first off, thank you for your presentation. I think it was very informative. I was curious, though, wanted to figure out, and I don't know if maybe this was showcased or not, what the rate at which global warming is occurring based on the temperature, if you have that number, maybe on an annual basis or any type of basis, and then based on that rate, did you have any predictive cases showcasing global warming, and at what point is the Earth inhabitable?
No, go ahead.
Essentially.
Well, yeah, in terms of just global warming, I mean, it's still a term, so it encompasses a lot of different things. So things like the CO2, the emissions, that would be more as a result kind of the global warming. So we have to study the underlying variables behind it to actually get a kind of a clearer picture of it. So we had the factors from the beginning, and then also we kind of had it later in the presentation, but going through kind of predictions of these catastrophic events, because ultimately these are going to be the result of the global warming, right? It would be the storms that we have, the flooding, the rising sea levels. It'd be kind of this entire encompassing thing that affects the entire planet. So just saying, well, what's the rate of global warming? Well, it all depends on kind of not only the underlying factors of what's causing it, but our own kind of future as well, what we're putting into the environment and how that's having an effect.
So with the fires. Right. So we had one specific example about temperature increases and the wildfires, and what we didn't get to show you this, is specifically in the USA, the global temperature has been rising at like 2.5 degrees, which is outpacing temperature rises everywhere else in the world. And this was an example of the Paradise wildfire a couple of years ago, which was the worst on record in 100 years, and caused it destroyed 1.8 million acres of forest land, which, it's a great loss. So we had examples for each type of catastrophic events that we were going to showcase, but we can talk to you later.
Gotcha. Thank you again.
Sure.
A related question on how you're defining catastrophes. If you look at the last 100 years, the number of strong hurricanes and strong tornadoes have actually gone down drastically. But if you look at the totals, they've gone up. So is the total important? Is the strength important? Is the total just an artifact if you're better able to detect tornadoes?
Go ahead. Which one? The catastrophic events. This one? This one? No. Okay. So this is another one about the storms and floods. So again, what we are showing you essentially is that as the temperature anomalies have gone up, we can see that the intensity and the frequency, they're coming at a faster pace, and they're causing more destruction. And we had a couple of examples to show, this was the worst in India in 100 years, which was like just that one storm flooding was like $5.5 billion. And then there was this other typhoon in Japan, which again was $3.5 billion in economic damages. So these are specific single events that have resulted in such humongous damages. So this was just to showcase that if we do not take action now, this is just going to keep coming at us more rapidly.
Yeah, so...
Yes, so the data set that we used,
Yeah.
we didn't have tornadoes.
Yeah, so I understand your point. The thing to remember, too, is that we're increasingly getting more urbanized as well. So as more people are living in denser areas in the world, that these effects will have a lot more damages on, economics, on a lot of different things, on losses of life. And we're not going to stop moving away from cities. We're not going to stop moving away from, these areas where they're getting hit. So, while that's true, yeah, the population is also increasing. And as we can see kind of from the temperature anomalies in the beginning, that when we kind of get for the long-term averages and we adjust for it, that the temperatures are not rising naturally. We are having an effect on it. So, and we can also see kind of in other things around the world that higher temperatures typically will be associated with a lot more catastrophic events.
Yeah. For solution, oh, do you want, you sure? Okay, so we talked about solutions as we went through in terms of mitigation, the switching coal, innovation, and then also we have adaptation, right? So if there's more catastrophes, it's inevitable. They're going to continue. So there's a lot of literature on adaptation, preparing for, and processes, practices, and structures, flood defenses, drought-resistant crops, early warning systems, dam management, government policies, public awareness, disaster prevention, and redesigning the communication systems. So there's a lot that can be done.
But I thought there were things that we were doing to cause it. Is this just naturally happening, or should we stop certain things in technology? Like, what should humankind do? That's what I mean.
Yeah. So as I probably should have put all the solutions at the back, but I didn't. But in any event, so for companies, right, there's renewable energy is a real big one. Obviously, reducing our reliance on coal is another. Innovation to capture that CO2 out of our atmosphere is yet another. So in those areas, I think we can all do better. And even I read some literature on PepsiCo. Indra Nooyi had talked about sustainable farming and making sure that, we're efficient and also trying to move towards, making sure there's less energy used in the process. Is that helpful?
All right, good job, guys. As I always ask every team, can you just introduce your university, one or two facts that people don't know about UConn?
Go ahead.
Well, we are all from the School of Business in UConn, Connecticut. So we're very proud of our Huskies. We always say, "Go Huskies," anywhere we go. But I think Connecticut is a very beautiful place. I especially love the fall season in Connecticut. You get to experience all 4 seasons very distinctly. And sometimes a lot of people ask me, "Aren't you afraid of the snow and the winter?" And I always say, well, with things everywhere warming up, I think Connecticut is a safe place to be.
Very good. Thank you all.
Yeah.
Good job.
Yeah, I want to plug Connecticut one last time. So Connecticut does have, an analytic program. Prasanthi is a part of that analytic program, which was started just about 5 years ago. So I think that's something new and exciting. And I went to UConn many moons ago, and there was no sidewalks, and we had a mud index. But today they have sidewalks, so that's pretty big.
Great. Thank you, guys.